Hey, sports fans, Larry Eder, RunBlogRun, your favorite program, socialing the distance. Today we have Sean Ingle. He's the chief sports reporter for theguardian.com. You can see it everywhere. I get it daily, and I hope you guys do too. Sean, it's great to see you.
We go back a fair way, Larry. Lovely to see you too.
Yes, and it's been 19 months, I think, since I've been able to see your charming face. And I went to Dubai, and then I went to a New Balance meet. And then that, just started going again in a few weeks, got to go to 3 things in Oregon. How are sports doing in the UK right now?
Well, they're back, and sort of crowds are generally limited to roughly most places around a quarter of capacity. So, and the hope is that, in a month's time, we'll be closer to half, and maybe towards even full by the fall. So fingers crossed things are heading the right way. But because of this new Delta variant, they've pushed everything back for 4 weeks, only sort of literally an hour ago. So that's where we are.
You have, last weekend, you had the European Cup British 10K trials. Eilish McColgan won the women's and looked quite good. And then Mo, our friend Mo, had some challenges. You want to tell us about that?
Yeah, and I was watching him closely during the warm-up, and I spoke to both some British athletics people and his people, and they both told me that out in Flagstaff he'd looked really good. So, to be honest, I was expecting a sort of a typical Mo run, really, stay with the pace for till 600 to go, then strike and win. And it became evident pretty early on that he was struggling. He tried his best, but he was beaten by Mark Scott in the trials, and he finished 8th overall. I'm sure your listeners will know Olympic qualifying standard time is 27:28. He ran 27:50, so a long way outside. Afterwards, he said that he'd had a little ankle niggle, which he'd picked up 10 days earlier, but said, I can still qualify for the Olympics, and also predicted he could still win a gold. I think the first is possible. I think the second is potentially delusional, but we shall see.
Is there another chance for him to make the 10,000 squad for the UK?
Yeah, they have announced, British Athletics have announced on Monday that they're arranging a hastily arranged invitational race at the British Athletics Championships in Manchester in 11 days' time. So a Friday week, he will be paced by a number of pacemakers, and they're also trying to recruit an international field. With the hope that he'll get the qualifying time. Because he comes second in the trials, he will automatically make it to Tokyo if he gets the time.
Cool. We just saw Josh Kerr. I was in Portland, and he ran that 3:31:55. How do you think he has a good shot of making the British team?
It's very interesting. For years and years, we in Britain, the middle distances were obviously the golden age of British middle distance running. Well, there was a few golden ages, but particularly the sort of Ovet, Coe, Cram, Peter Elliott area. And then there wasn't really much afterwards. But the last couple of years, things have got very interesting. And obviously Josh Kerr's one of several. He's more 15. Jake Whiteman's very strong at 15. There's a couple of others as well. Charlie Grice being another. But particularly over 800, it's starting to get very, very interesting. So we've got Elliot Giles in the winter ran 1:43 indoors, that broke Seb Coe's British indoor record, which has stood for donkey's years. We've got a number of others that are incredibly strong. Daniel Rowden is highly touted. I'm trying to think who else there is. There's a bunch of them that are all capable of running, sort of 1:43, 1:44, and even at the weekend, we had British athletes coming from nowhere to do very well. So I think we unusually we have a bunch of very, very good 815 meter athletes that, because really there's especially in 800, there's probably no absolute standout male runner, given that Brazier's seems a little bit up and down. There's potential there that we might well, Brits might well sneak a medal, but we shall see.
What about on the women's side? You've got Gemma Reiki and Laurie Moore and Eilish McColgan. Do you see them as medal potential?
Not in the 15. I think well, depends who turns up. I mean, the 15 is potentially absolutely stacked. I mean, if Hassan, Kipyeong, and Sagai turn up in the 15, I can't see anyone else getting a medal. I just think they are way out in front. And Laura is a brilliant 1500 meter runner, but she's ran 3:55, didn't she, the other day? But those three are just crazy. But it's possible that only Kipyeong turns up. That we may see Hassan just do the 5 and the 10K. And I think Sagai has sort of suggested she might focus more on the 5. So I think it's unlikely in the 15. I think the 8 becomes I think, again, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Kipyeong is the favourite in the 8 by some way. But after that, I think Riki's got a shot. Muir, I'm not quite sure if she's got the speed over 8. We've got another young athlete called Keely Hutchinson in the UK that was a British indoor champion.
Sure.
She's on 158. She's only, I want to say, I think she's just turned 19 or 20. I need to check that. But she's she's like a teenager, just outside of teenager. She's got a huge amount of potential. So there is that sort of sense that actually, we are in Britain finally, for the first time in a lot of years, have a bunch of very, very good. I mean, not world beating. I don't want to go over the board, but there's potential there. There's hope there that when it gets to the men's 800 meter and 1500 meter and the women's, there will be a shot. And I forgot to mention at the weekend Oliver Dustin, who probably is not a very familiar name to American listeners. He probably not a very familiar name to British listeners, but he was born in November 2000, and he was running in Nice at the weekend, and he ran a 1:43, broke his PB by 2 seconds, only 20 years old. And if you watch the video, it's worth watching. You can find it on YouTube because he's in 6th or 7th place, I think, with 200 to go, and he absolutely bombs home. And anyone that can run a 1:43.8 has got a chance of doing something. And I also forgot to mention another one, Max Bergin, who's 18, and he's run 1:44.14 this season. So it's interesting, and it's very, very open. I think there's a lot of people that run high 1:43s and into the 1:44s, but no one has really set an outstanding mark yet. Where do you stand on Dina Asher-Smith? Well, I mean, obviously she's a huge talent. I mean, she's the reigning 200 meter world champion after all. I think she says she's a lot stronger this year, and I think those early signs are that she was unbeaten in 9 races indoor and outdoors this season. I was there at Gateshead on that very freezing and wet night where I don't really put too much stock into that because I'm pretty sure that both Sha'Carri Richardson and Shelley-Ann Fraser-Pryce thought to themselves, this is isn't a night for heroes. It's a night, to get your job done, run okay, but you don't leave it all on the track. But nonetheless, she won there. And last week in Florence, she ran the second quickest 200 meter time of the year, just behind Shanae Miller-Weibo. If I was a betting man, and I am, I think it's unlikely she wins gold in the 1 and the 2, because I think you've got to put Shelley-Ann and Shanae ahead of her for now. But that said, she must have a real strong chance of finishing the medals in both events, like she did at the Worlds.
Cool. What about your relay squads?
Well, that, to be honest, I think one thing the Brits have been good at in the last, I want to say, probably going back, 2013 onwards, with a few hiccups, is really realizing that the relays have soft medals. And there was essentially the number 2 coach, really the sprints coach, a guy called Stephen Maguire, and relays coach, was a master at perfecting changeovers, working on tactic, everything. He was brilliant. He's now left, and that's also coincided really with a dip in talent, particularly in the men's 4, but also perhaps the women's 4 as well. So I think the men's 1 and the women's 1 have chances, but the mixed and the 400s, I think there's less hope than usual. I'm particularly the men's have really fallen off a cliff. Really, we have one reasonable runner in Matt Hudson-Smith over 4, and that's it really. And he's only running sort of mid 45s at the moment. So I wouldn't expect the sort of the 3 or 4 medals that Brits normally get. It might just be a couple at best.
Is Rooney finally retired?
He's still going. I mean, I do chat to him now and again, and he is hoping at the trials to be able to run, I think, a time that will get him onto the relay squad. But he's not. I mean, he's been a talisman for so many years. People, even when he was running 45 mid, 45 high in individual events, he would step onto that relay track and seem to run a second quicker in the relay. But I don't think he is where he wants to be at the moment. There is still time, but with the British trial starting in just 11 days' time, the clock is ticking.
What do you think of Jody Williams?
I think she has done incredibly well. I mean, she's had a strange career in many respects. That she was touted as our sort of golden girl, 10 years ago. People thought she could be the one that would almost do what Dina has done, and a number of injuries and the like has sort of pushed her back. But she's someone that could, you could easily see her picking up a medal in the mixed relay, just about, or not easily is the wrong word. She could pick up a medal somewhere on a relay squad if she does the 4, which I think they're steering her towards. But obviously individually, you look at that, again, some of the athletes that are going to be going under 50 seconds there. I don't think she is capable of that.
Mm-hmm. Caleb Hawkins, what's your thoughts on the marathon?
Well, you can't knock him. He's never done the sort of the time on the track. Sorry, the time on the road, even rather, that would make you think, he can mix it with the Kipchoge's and some of the Kenyans, the best Ethiopians. But he is, a major championship performer. He's a guy that's a 2:08 marathon runner, and he's finished, 4th, both in 2017 and 2019 Worlds. We know, though, that at the Worlds, often the very best don't show up. So I think in the heat of Tokyo, or Sapporo even, and against the very best in the world, I think he's a lovely athlete, a brilliant, lovely man, but I think it would be some effort for him to squeak into a medal at the Olympics in next month.
British athletics, I have this theory now about global federations like British Athletics and USA Track and Field. I think they're naturally dysfunctional, but they all have their challenges. British Athletics had some challenges this year, and Joe Coach, the new leader, came in and brought in her own team. I'm fascinated what you think about the coaching changes that she's made and how you think that'll affect British Athletics. Excuse me.
That's a good question. I think it's fair to say that everyone in British Athletics likes Christian Malcolm, the new head coach. He's popular, he's well liked. At the same time, the coaches I speak to and the athletes I speak to think this has probably come too early. I think he was surprised he got the job. My understanding is he went for the job thinking he would, with the hope of essentially becoming Stephen McGrath's assistant, because Stephen McGrath was the big favourite for the job. A man with decades of experience and hugely respected. So I think he has found it difficult and he's found it challenging. You hear lots of stories from athletes and from coaches, sort of a general unhappiness. This is athletics, this is track. People are always unhappy. There's always something to moan about. However, I do think there is a question mark over the sport, just like there has been before now. It's not just Joe Coates or Christian. And there is, I think, a general unhappiness, but I think people are holding their breath and seeing what happens. But it's fair to say there is a lot of unease among senior people in the sport that I speak to.
How does BBC has been one of the reasons why British athletics has done so well, because they give the sport in the UK a lot of coverage. They do a great job. There was rumors when the last contract was coming around that they weren't happy with things, and they showed it. They cut the number of meets down by about 50%. Now, they've gone back and are adding some Diamond League events on, but how is BBC and British Athletics doing at this time?
Well, I mean, this is one area, and this predates the Joe Coates era, where British Athletics dropped the ball. They were getting over £2 million a year, essentially from the BBC to show. I think it was 5 meets in total, and also that they also paid for all the production costs as well. The BBC. So we were looking at the British indoors, British outdoor trials, Diamond League, 2 Diamond League events, another indoor event, and there may have been one. I think that was it. 5 or 6 events. So it's a lot of money really for what was on the table. And they knew this event, this deal was running out in 2020, and really in 2017, after the 56,000 people that show up at London Stadium every day, that's when the BBC should have said, or the British Athletics should have said, look, can we extend this deal? We'll give you the same terms, or the sports rights have changed a bit. We'll offer you on a bit of a discount. That's when they should have done it. But they let it run. They weren't proactive. And by the time they held meetings, I think the BBC looked at it and thought, we can buy the Diamond League and have all the events with the world feed, and we don't have to pay anything more than what we have to pay, which is not a huge amount, it's my understanding. Or we can invest in these 5 meetings, 2 of which will do good numbers, the 2 Diamond League meetings, and not much else, So I think it became a no-brainer, really. I mean, British Athletics still gets a lot of money from the government. It gets lottery funding through UK Sport, which is roughly, last I looked, I think it's about 28 million over the last 4 years, well between 2016 and 2020. So 7 million a year. So that helps it. But financially, I think its reserves are dwindling. One of its big sort of revenue sort of gainers has gone. One of the other big ones was holding the anniversary games in London. That on a good year, I'm told by people that would know, it would make about £3 million. And even on a bad year, it'd probably make over £1 million. It's not being staged in London this year. It's going to Gateshead. Typically, the second Diamond League meeting, I'm told, in the UK, generally sort of breaks even or makes a small profit. Given the crowd restrictions and so on, I think we can, it would be surprising if it'd probably make a loss. So that's going to be another potential 3 million that they're not going to get. Now they've got $1 million from the London Council essentially for basically agreeing to move to Gateshead again. So they'll have a bit of money, but yeah, it's tough times, I think, for British Athletics. There are question marks about a lot of things on and off the track.
Talk to me about the World Marathon Majors. With the pandemic, the races have been moved around. Boston was really the last to change. London did an event this last year, which I think captured the hearts of many. Are the marathon majors in trouble? Are they okay? Are these virtual races diluting the interest in them? Where do you stand on all this right now?
I mean, a major caveat is that I don't speak to all the major marathons very often. I know the London lot very well, and I speak to them very well, and so I can only really speak from their perspective. They think, and I have to, I think, agree with them that last year's marathon, the way they did it, was a success. The fact they had so many people running it globally, was a huge. I sort of lifted everyone's sort of spirits. They felt it made the marathon even more inclusive because people had 24 hours to do it. Therefore, you could run the London Marathon, you could walk the London Marathon essentially, and then get your T-shirt, get your medal, and they, I think, were surprised how popular that idea was. I'm interested. Obviously, Boston are doing something similar now. I am interested to see how that works over the long term. When we're out of a pandemic, when hopefully touch wood 2-3 years time, there are so many marathons about. Will people still say, I'm going to pay X amount of money to virtually run Boston and London?
Yeah.
I would be surprised that if it sold out. But let us see. Let's be open-minded about it. I know London in particular raises huge amounts for charity. It's the sort of the biggest one-day fundraising for charity in the world. And so I think they are hopeful they'll be back in October. That all plans are they'll have more people running it in person in London than ever before. So they are hopeful that it will be a major event, and it will be another sort of sign that hopefully, touch wood, we are heading out of this pandemic, and it will be a big event on the streets of London in October.
So you've got the Olympic trials the last week in June. We start ours from the 18th to the 27th. I'll be heading back up to lovely Oregon. And then we've got Tokyo Olympics. And it will be a strange Olympics. Let's just put it that way. Can you give us some insight into what we should expect in Tokyo?
You're right. It's strange and uncertain. The third playbooks for athletes are being released tomorrow, so I'll have a better idea there, and for the media on Wednesday. But the suggestion is, for example, that some countries where the Delta variant is sort of running amok, or threatening to, including Britain, is that the journalists will have to go there and quarantine for 6 days. I hear different stories. Some are saying it's a hard quarantine where you can't even sort of talk to another journalist in a corridor. You're in your room. Others are saying there will be some flexibility, and if you are double vaccinated or you have a one-shot solution, there will be, as long as you stay in your bubble, and that bubble can go to the media center, you can go to events and so on, you can do things, but it will be very different. You have to sort of tell the organizers where you're going in advance, and part of the fun sometimes with Olympics, I follow mostly track, but if there's a exciting something. I remember going to watch Simone Biles on a whim, so I had a couple of spare hours in Rio, and that was one of the highlights of Rio for me. That will not be possible this time. Even, to be honest, the socializing and the networking and the just chatting to coaches and meeting them for a coffee, or one thing that all of us as journalists and if you're another coach, all that sort of catching up will be a lot harder. We don't know about crowds yet. The indications are that there will be some, but again, I think organisers are nervous. But even things like the mix zones, and for people who are listening who don't know what a mix zone is, athletes come through and there's normally a scrum of people. You've got your head in somebody's armpit. You're trying to get some quotes to try and throw the story on. They are sort of limited to sort of 90 seconds now for athletes. The numbers will be limited to them. So just the whole feel and throb and everything will be very different in Tokyo.
Yeah, the USSC has told us, and this would have been my 10th Olympics covering, and I think 8th that I've attended, that we're not guaranteed in the stadium every day, obviously, and that if someone's sick on our plane, we go into quarantine. And, I had the one shot. Are they requiring all media to have be vaccinated?
No, but I think we'll hear more on Wednesday. They're sort of saying it's not a requirement, but it may give some flexibility there.
Did you think the Olympics should have been canceled, or where did you stand in the whole thing?
It's such a difficult question, and I have huge sympathy for the Japanese organisers.
Sure.
When it was rescheduled, sort of back last March, 15 months ago, the way it was sold, this idea the world would be out of the pandemic, full crowds, sort of that message of hope, I thought it was quite a compelling message. We are clearly not there now. I do think organisers feel they're in a bind. They're already losing billions of pounds. The IOC needs it to go ahead because that's how they make their money. And it just feels, it's such a shame that it couldn't be pushed back, a few months, even to October, say, when we might be in a bit.
Yeah.
Obviously, they can't. And I remember speaking to people last year, and they were saying, well, the contracts for villages, their flats and their apartments and their houses for people.
Yeah.
Stay on. It's I'm torn.
No, I feel the same way. I mean, I have friends in Japan, and they're surprised that it's going on. And my thought was, if the IOC had been able to pull back just a bit, they would have said, yeah, we can't do this till 2022. Because right now what we've got is we've got Commonwealth Europeans in the Worlds in 2022. And in my belief, the first global championship will be the Worlds in Eugene in 2022, where we'll be able to have a pretty good crowd. I mean, we're going to have people in the stands in Hayward. They had, they announced 5,000 people a night at the NCs. Our people in the stadium said it was closer to 2,000. But that's good. I mean, they got people in there, so I'm happy with that. You'll obviously be coming over to Eugene. Have you been to Eugene before?
Yeah, I was there for the US trials in 2015. And I was in Portland a couple of times, actually, but most recently for the World Indoors in 2016.
Cool. Yeah, I know this. I went through the stadium on May 7th and 8th. And it is gorgeous. It's the nicest athletic stadium I've ever seen. When you put $200 million into something, they got their money's worth, and it really captures the whole Oregon history, which I think is really cool. And I think our trials. I mean, we've got performances coming out of our ears, and especially with the NCAA this past weekend. So it should be a lot of fun. Talk to me about. I want to talk to you about Caster Semenya. We followed her for years, and I was there in 2009 when she won her first medals, and I've interviewed her at least a dozen times, and no matter how much pressure has been put on her, she handles it with class. Again, it's one of those complicated things. I understand through the Men at Science of Sport, Ross Tucker and company, the explanations of the differences between Caster and some of the women she competes with. But we're getting into an incredibly complicated era where we've had, in the last couple of weeks, a couple American athletes who've come out as trans. We've also had some lawsuits in the state of Connecticut where high school girls are suing trans athletes for taking opportunities away from them. And I get notes from people just saying, hey, we're trying to understand this. Can you shed any light on some of the challenges in sport coming in the area of trans athletes?
Sure. Well, I mean, I think, first of all, it's important not to conflate athletes like Caster Semenya, who was born as a woman, but also has internal testes. So she's essentially a 46 XY, or an athlete with a difference of sex development. So with transgender, because they are people that were one sex and have now, identify as another one. So that's but both, I think, are incredibly difficult, emotive areas. Semenya, I'm with you. I have a huge amount of sympathy for her. Whenever I've been in her presence, I've been struck by how classy she has been. I know people on both sides of the experts that presented in CAS. I was speaking to them quite regularly, and the Court of Arbitration Sport had a very difficult decision. I think at the heart of this debate, and I think the scientific evidence is emerging, though, and I'm moving sort of more now towards the sort of transgender issue, but I think it applies to both in some ways. If you undergo male puberty, you get such a sort of a rush of hormones, of androgens, of testosterone, of extra bone density and strength. The science I've seen, and there's been a couple of pieces, articles recently in scientific journals, one by Emma Hilton and Tommy Longberg, a Swedish scientist and English scientist, and another by Joanne. My name is going to, let me find it. Joanna Harper. Sorry, my memory slipped there. Who was as a male, was a 2:23 marathon runner, and has now transitioned. And that sort of science has both suggested that even when you lower your testosterone, so you were a man, you now identify as a woman, you lower your testosterone to sort of fulfill the guidelines, you still have these permanent advantages. So in terms of if you want sport purely to be about fairness and the need for women, and that, born women who are, born women and are women, then you can see why sports are saying, and hang on a second, this isn't fair. If your primary goal is inclusiveness, then that matters less to you. So I think this is what this debate is about. And in the combat sports and the collision sports, there's a third area, and that's safety. So World Rugby, for instance, we all know rugby is a tough, violent game, lots of injuries, lots of concussions. They have decided that it's too dangerous for trans women to play. However, they let trans men, so women who basically have taken testosterone and are now identified as men, they can play the men's game if they sign a waiver.
Wow.
So that sort of shows you the dilemmas they have. So World Rugby's argument is we're not discriminating against anyone, but trans women can still play touch rugby where there's no, but actually at the international level, because of the safety issue, because of the unfair and the unfairness issue, they're not allowed to play international rugby.
Speaking of waivers, Sean, if you and I go to Tokyo, we have to sign a waiver that says that if we get sick or something else happens, the IOC is not liable. What's your thoughts on that regarding the whole COVID situation? Well,
it doesn't surprise me. I guess their thinking must be, if a new variant suddenly swept around Tokyo and a number of officials, journalists, athletes were very sick, and a few of them died through it. I suspect they would be hit very hard, so they're just covering themselves. I'm not surprised by it, to be honest, but it perhaps sort of goes back to your question a few minutes ago. Should the Olympics be taking place? If we're all having to sign waivers saying if we die from COVID, there's nothing going on, then it perhaps says something.
In 2012, I was asked by BBC what Arab countries should host the Olympics. At the time, I suggested Turkey. And I'm to the place right now where I think we almost need a permanent summer spot, and I would like to suggest Athens because I think it could really help their economy. And we've got to take some little more common sense towards these championships. Any thoughts on permanent places for, London would be a perfect permanent place for the World Athletics Championships. Although I think World Athletics is still the size that we can move around, and having it in the U.S. is a huge deal for us next year. I mean, the thing that's frustrating for me is there's very little information about it out there right now. And I understand that because of the pandemic. Any thoughts on putting an Olympics in a permanent place, World Championships in a permanent place?
I like them being spread around. I think, it makes them special. And I think there are enough great cities and countries that they can be staged. What I would say, though, is there is that balance between trying to grow the sport and also, taking it to places where it has an audience. And I would say, I think they've got to be, world athletics have got to be a little bit careful, and so has, as the Olympics, to make sure that we are going to places where there is that heritage, still there. I think Doha I enjoyed, and it was a good championships. To me, apart from the one or two nights, the atmosphere wasn't great, and I think it perhaps came a little bit early for Qatar, even though I enjoyed a couple of weeks I was there.
Well, that was my feeling about Encinal in Rio. My brother and I stayed in a favela, and we had a little coffee place we'd go to, and they'd look at us and they knew we were American. Like, why are you here? And one of the guys said to me in Portuguese, well, you're in a smart place because they don't rob poor people. And, we actually felt rather safe. There were soldiers everywhere. And I thought the IOC had really pushed the envelope on that one. To me about one of the fun things about Olympics is, like you said, getting to enjoy the city. The thing in Tokyo is we're in the stadium, we're in our hotel, and that's pretty much it. You'll be covering multiple sports, is that correct?
Yes. Yeah. Obviously track will be my main focus, but in the first week in particular, I will be covering other sports as well.
What types of any political challenges on the horizon for the Olympic family?
Well, I think more. But sort of there are other challenges that are more important at the moment. Clearly, with COVID and with the heat and everything else in Tokyo. Long term, I think the issues are like they've always been. Really, Olympics are very expensive. How do you reduce their costs? How do you knock the number of athletes down? That's why you've had Agenda 2020 and Agenda 2020 +5 to try and sort of accept that. That's why we've got new sports like breakdancing or breaking coming in 2024 and skateboarding in these Olympics. The challenges are what they always are. I think one thing that will be quite interesting in the coming sort of years really is looking at the IOC and the individual federations, and the IOC may not have as much money to sort of hand around those individual federations, many of whom would have perhaps struggled a bit more during the pandemic. So that might be quite interesting to see how that all plays out. But the issues are what they always are with the IOC.
The Stebco, the president of World Athletics, has been a huge cheerleader of Tokyo, really saying Tokyo can be done safely. And but he's also, in the last couple of weeks, was quoted as saying that if Tokyo doesn't happen, British athletics won't survive. And I've heard that on other sports and other, some of the other global federations. What's your take on that? What are you hearing about that?
Yeah, well, I think what most people don't realize is that take away some of the very big Olympic sports. I think world athletics would survive. Obviously, the tennis and soccer would be fine. But a lot of these Olympic sports, the weightlifting, the boxing, archery, essentially every 4 years they get a big lump of money from the IOC that comes from the Olympics, and that's where the bulk of the money comes from. So it's sort of self-evident really. If the IOC is getting whatever it is, a couple of billion quid from TV rights and whatever else from this Olympics, and suddenly that doesn't come through, it's very hard for that money to trickle down to other sports.
Well, Sean, you survived 39 minutes and 45 seconds. You've set a world record with me, my friend. It's great seeing you. I hope to see you soon, probably in the fall in London. There's a chance I'm going to be in Tokyo, but we don't know. But thanks again. You were fantastic today. And we'll check back with you after the British trials to see how you're doing.
Fantastic. Okay? Lovely speaking to you, Larry, as always. Take care.
Cheers. This is Larry Eder, RunBlogRun, Socialing the Distance. We're with Sean Ingle, the chief sports reporter for The Guardian Global. Sean, thank you so much. It was awesome. Hey, sports fans, Larry Eder, RunBlogRun, today, Socialing the Distance So with Sean Ingle, a good buddy, who is the chief sports reporter for the Guardian News. It's the global. They're everywhere, man. And one of my favorite reads. He writes about multiple sports, but he loves athletics. And we spent 41 minutes with him today. We spoke about the British trials. We spoke about Mo Farah. We spoke about Tokyo. We spoke about new shoes. We spoke about some of the top athletes and how he's going to try and cover Tokyo. And I thought it was a lot of fun. Sean is very analytical. He is a guy who likes to put the story in front of you and let you, the reader, make the decision, which is the way journalism's supposed to be. And he does a great job. So he's one of my favorite reads. So if you get a chance, check out Sean Ingle in the Guardian News, and make sure you listen to the whole and watch the whole Socialing the Distance with Sean as well. This is Larry Eder, RunBlogRun, signing off. If you like us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. If you love us, subscribe to YouTube. We have over 2,500 audios and videos, 369 from 2020 alone. Surely there's something for everybody. Stay safe. Talk to you soon.